Empty hallways, strange noises, and unexplained shadows. Welcome to the world of the night shift. These 3 stories will have you sleeping with the lights on and second-guessing every creak in your workplace. The night shift can be quite terrifying, but for these workers, it became a nightmare they'll never forget. Prepare yourself for 3 chilling tales that will make you think twice about staying late at the office. The night shift at our hospital was usually uneventful, but that changed on a chilly October evening. I was the only nurse on duty in the oncology ward. The corridors were dimly lit, casting long shadows that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. It was around 2 a.m. when I first noticed something unusual. The air had suddenly become heavy, almost oppressive, and the usual beeping of machines seemed muffled, as if coming from far away. As I made my rounds, I approached room 237, a room that was supposed to be empty, but as I got closer, I heard the faint sound of labored breathing coming from inside. My heart rate quickened as I pushed open the door. The room was cold, much colder than the hallway, and I could see my breath misting in front of me. In the bed sat an elderly woman, her skin so pale it was almost translucent. Her wispy white hair seemed to float around her head, moving slightly despite the lack of any breeze. "Ma'am?" I called out softly, my voice shaking. "Are you all right? How did you get here?" She turned to face me, her movements unnaturally slow and jerky. Her eyes were milky white, seeming to look through me rather than at me. In a raspy whisper that sent chills down my spine, she said, "I've been waiting for you. It's time to go home." I backed out of the room, my heart pounding in my chest. I rushed to the nurse's station, fumbling with the phone to call security. As I waited for someone to pick up, I glanced back down the hallway. The door to room 237 was now wide open, and I could see a figure standing in the doorway. It was the old woman, but something was different. Her feet weren't touching the ground. She was hovering a few inches above the floor. I dropped the phone and ran. I don't know how long I ran for, but when I finally stopped, I found myself in the hospital's basement archive, my hands shaking. I pulled out the oldest patient records we had, and there she was, a photo of the same woman I had just seen. According to the records, she had been a patient who died in room 237 exactly 20 years ago, that very night. Gathering my courage, I went back upstairs with the file. The room was empty, the bed neatly made as if no one had been there. But on the bedside table, I found a single white flower, a lily, the kind we use in funeral arrangements at the hospital. To this day, I can't explain what I saw, but in the years since, other night shift workers have reported similar experiences in room 237. Some have heard whispers, others have felt a cold hand on their shoulder, and always, there's a faint scent of lilies in the air. I still work the night shift at the same hospital, but I never walk past room 237 alone anymore. Some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed again. When the lights go out and everyone else goes home, that's when the real horrors begin. Join us as we explore 3 bone-chilling encounters from those who dared to work the night shift alone. Our office building stood like a monolith against the city skyline, its windows dark except for the occasional flicker of a security light. As the night security guard, I was used to the eerie quiet that settled over the building after hours. But nothing could have prepared me for the events of that night. It was a few minutes before midnight when I first heard it, the soft ding of an elevator arriving at the ground floor. I frowned, checking the security cameras. The building was empty. I hadn't let anyone in. Yet there it was, the elevator door sliding open smoothly. I watched as a shadowy figure stepped into the elevator. The doors closed and the indicator showed it ascending. Floor after floor it climbed, stopping randomly, the doors opening to reveal empty hallways before closing again and moving on. This went on for almost an hour. I tried to rationalize it. A system malfunction perhaps? But deep down, I knew this was something else entirely. Gathering my courage, I decided to investigate. I took the stairs to the 20th floor, where the elevator had stopped once again. As I approached, I heard whispers coming from inside, voices speaking in languages I couldn't understand. My flashlight flickered, the beam weakening as I got closer to the elevator. "Security!" I called out, my voice echoing in the empty hallway. "Who's there?" The whisper stopped abruptly, replaced by an unnatural silence. Slowly, painfully slowly, the elevator doors began to open. I raised my flashlight, my hand shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady. The elevator car was empty, but the mirrored walls reflected dozens of faces. Men, women, children, all with eyes full of despair. They seemed to be reaching out, their hands pressing against the other side of the mirror. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. As I watched, unable to move, unable to look away, the faces began to distort. Their features melted, running like wax down the mirrors. The whispers returned, growing louder until they became screams. The elevator doors slammed shut with such force that the entire hallway shook. Then, with a sound like 1,000 voices crying out in terror, the elevator plummeted down the shaft. I heard the crash from where I stood, feeling the vibration through the soles of my feet. When the day shift arrived, we investigated, but the elevator was in perfect working order, sitting quietly on the ground floor. There was no sign of any malfunction, no indication of the horror I had witnessed. In the weeks that followed, I pored over the building's history, looking for any clue to explain what I had seen, and what I found chilled me to the bone. 50 years ago, when our office was first built, an elevator had crashed during construction, killing dozens of workers. I never believed in ghost stories until I started working late nights. Our office occupied the top floor of an old converted warehouse, all exposed brick and iron fixtures that creaked and groaned as the temperature dropped at night. Most evenings, I was the only one there, racing against deadlines in the eerie quiet. It was close to midnight when I first heard it, the sound of footsteps echoing from the far end of the office. I dismissed it as the building settling, but then came the unmistakable sound of a door opening and closing. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small in the vast open-plan office. No response. I stood up, peering over the tops of the cubicles. The motion sensor lights at the far end of the room had come on, illuminating a section that should have been empty. My heart raced as I saw a shadow move across the wall, too solid to be a trick of the light. Grabbing my phone, I dialed security, but the call wouldn't go through. The line was dead. I looked back up and my blood ran cold. Standing at the end of my row of cubicles was a figure, barely visible in the dim light. It was tall, unnaturally so, its head nearly touching the ceiling. Its limbs were too long, too thin, bending at odd angles. I blinked, hoping it was just my tired eyes playing tricks on me. But when I opened them, the figure had moved closer, now only a few cubicles away. I could make out more details now. Its skin was a sickly gray, stretched tight over a gaunt frame. Where its face should have been, there was only smooth, featureless skin. Panic overtook me. I ran, not daring to look back, heading for the stairwell. But as I reached for the door handle, I felt an icy touch on my shoulder. Slowly, I turned around. The creature towered over me, its blank face inches from mine. A seam appeared where its mouth should be, slowly widening into a grotesque smile filled with needle-sharp teeth. From somewhere deep within it came a voice, raspy and cold. "You don't belong here. This is our time now." I must have blacked out, because the next thing I remember is waking up at my desk, sunlight streaming through the windows. I convinced myself it had been a vivid nightmare brought on by too much caffeine and too little sleep. But as I packed up my things to leave, I noticed something on my computer screen. It was a document I didn't remember opening, filled with line after line of the same phrase. "The night belongs to us. The night belongs to us. The night belongs to us." I quit my job that day. I couldn't bring myself to tell anyone what I'd seen. Who would believe me? But I know what's lurking in that office when the sun goes down. And I know that somewhere out there, in the dark corners of old buildings and empty offices, the creatures of the night are waiting for their chance to reclaim what they believe is theirs.